This is your World War III update. I got some big news for you today, and I guarantee you guessed it, you ain't gonna hear it anywhere else. It takes a crazy, kooky prepper guy to tell you the truth nowadays. Take a look at some of these pundits. You got Laura Loomer, doesn't know what an Arabic numeral is, falls for Mamdani's troll, who I should add, pay-per-view tomorrow in the Oval Office. That should be interesting. The president apparently said that he was going to hang some people for sedition, or at least that's what he explicitly stated, but people took it the wrong way, right? Even if he was legitimate in making the comment, we're heading to civil war. We got the market crashing when it was supposed to spike because NVIDIA blew out earnings. Now you got the Hang Seng and the Nikkei and all the Asian markets crashing. Bitcoin is crashing. The COP30 building where they were holding the climate change meeting burned down today. Epstein this, Venezuela that. Now you have Putin. Full military fatigues. Why is Vladimir Putin in full military fatigues on the day that we are told there was a 28 peace proposal which leaned Russia? You had all these Russian apparatchik commentators dancing on the graves of their NATO counterparts saying, ha, we won, right? And then you had all the Ukrainian pearl clutchers steeped in Trump derangement saying, Trump hates us, peeing their pants. Everybody's wrong. I'm going to tell you why. Yesterday, I told you that one of the main things that they're going for here, the main reason why they're putting forth this 28-point peace proposal is because it's all a Trojan horse to get NATO into what remains of Ukraine. They know there's a very low likelihood that they're going to actually be able to take back any of the Donbass, any of the other 4 annexed territories, unless they continuously hammer Russia with thousands upon thousands of long-range drones and missiles on a daily basis, to the point where they compromise Russian supply lines, which is possible. Mind you, it goes nuclear before that happens, right? So we're going to talk about this deal today, but this is all a Trojan horse to get NATO into Ukraine, and now we have it in writing. Exactly what I said yesterday. The reason why the Russians are actually not liking this deal is because it effectively renders whatever remains of NATO a de facto, or whatever remains of Ukraine, Freudian slip, a NATO state. And I warned you in advance, this is going to be one of the healthiest word salad videos because we're going all over the map tonight. This peace plan entails a security guarantee. What is a security guarantee? You can't use that terminology loosely. I'll explain it to you. President Trump's peace plan, according to Axios, for Ukraine includes a security guarantee modeled on NATO's Article 5, which would commit the U.S. and European allies to, get this, treat an attack on Ukraine as an attack on the entire transatlantic community. The only reason why you have NATO in the first place is for the Article 5 part. I mean, that's really the only purpose it serves. So if 90% of NATO is the Mutual Defense Pact, the all-for-one, one-for-all pact, and you're extending that to Ukraine, well, then you're effectively bringing Ukraine into NATO. And the only way you can impose such a thing at the ready when it's needed is if you have some defensive forces or military capacity inside Ukraine that is interoperable with NATO as a whole, because this is effectively Article 5. This is a nuclear guarantee. This is what the Russians didn't want. Now, I'm not saying that this is not going to go anywhere. We're going to get into the minutia in just a bit, because the Secretary of the Army, Chris Driscoll, who is apparently meeting, or who met with Zelensky in Ukraine, is going to meet with Vladimir Putin. We're going to talk about what that's about in just a moment. But I can tell you, by the grimacing scowl on Putin's face, I have never seen him look so perturbed and so fierce. Like, it really, he's got that look in his eye of a wolf who has a creature, or a wolf who's backed up in a corner. The Russians are not letting their guard down. This is why he didn't come out in a suit today. This is why he came out in military fatigues. Because the whole point of this thing is, number one, to get the Russians to put their guard down, or at least that's what the Russians have to view this as, right? Because they're winning. And so why would you only now be coming at this with this proposal when you've backstabbed everybody else that you've brought around Witkoff in the past? Why should we treat this situation as an authentic proposal? No, we're going to engage, but we're going to be vigilant and act as though you're getting ready to try some shit somewhere, like do some sort of decapitation strike or do some sort of major attack while all of this is going on. So Putin's making a statement that despite the progress on, or whatever, this peace proposal, even though Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson, denies that anything has changed since Alaska, okay? So that all of this is just theatrics, like I said yesterday. But there may be something to it. I say may because it appears as though the Ukrainians are starting to make some concessions. Excuse me. I aspirated the other day, and I just now have this persistent, snot in my throat or something. I hope it's not another sickness, but maybe it's developing into something. Maybe it's bacterial. I gotta get on that Jace Medical. I got lots of antibiotics stocked up, so if the shit hits the fan, I'll be all right. Which is a reminder, get yours through the link in the description if you want to support the channel. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about Chris Driscoll going to Russia. So why would you send a Secretary of the Army, not the Navy, not the Air Force, why would you send a guy like this, a company man, right? Why would you send him to meet with Vladimir Putin or Zelensky? Well, they say that originally he was supposed to go there because they wanted to discuss, Ukrainian military needs on the ground, but then the plans changed last minute, and now he is going in the capacity of a diplomat to speak with Vladimir Putin. Well, you would want a guy like this with the technical know-how that could potentially be able to assist in drawing the dividing lines and the boundaries if this ceasefire actually took shape. So this is actually bullish for the peace process, because this is saying that this would be a necessary step. But for somebody who's been outside of what's going on for so long and doesn't really understand what's going on the ground, I'm sure there's people who have a much greater capacity to do this. Of course, this guy's also a lawyer. He's buddies with J.D. Vance. Which doesn't mean much to Vladimir Putin, by the way, but he's done a stint in politics. He's a military officer, etc., etc. So Putin's going to take the meeting because he's going to want to try to get as much information from these people. He'll maintain, a comfortable distance at the far end of the table, just in case they sneak in some CIA technology with this guy. But this could be initiating talks on how they're actually going to work out the logistics of freezing the lines. Now, you wouldn't have that conversation with Vladimir Putin, though. You would have that conversation with his military general. So the fact that he's talking to Putin is fairly significant. This could just be Putin entertaining this. I actually suspect that there is a high probability right now that this entire thing is just a show, because you got Putin in military fatigues. He's looking more pissed than I've ever seen him before. You have, the Russians putting conscripts on all their critical infrastructure. The war has just been spiraling out of control. They're getting hit day after day with, oil refineries, gas pipelines, and now they're trying to pin this latest act of sabotage in a NATO country, in Poland, on the railroad tracks, on Russia, who Ukrainian saboteurs were at the behest of, or at least that is the claim, and it wasn't a false flag attack. So all of these things taken into consideration, the Russians have to presume that this is just an attempt by NATO to buy more time, and that the Ukrainians are not going to accept the deal, and that the Russians are not going to accept the deal. Neither side views it as tenable, so therefore this is just another way to buy time. But because things are escalating so drastically, and because we're potentially on the brink of massive sanctions impositions and seizure of hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian assets, this thing could spiral out of control in an intractable way very quickly. So let's contextualize all this, shall we? Because there's been some wild shit going on. Wild shit going on. And the only way I can do what I do, guys, is if I just laugh at the absurdity of it all, right? So we had the AI top in today. Because, look, this is crazy. This is crazy. Okay, so the Asian markets right now are crashing. Like hard, right? Japanese bonds are up, which is crazy. Their interest rates, so the carry trade is unraveling whatever remains of it. Bitcoin is plummeting in the pisser. MicroStrategies, this poor smuck right here, got caught holding a bag. If you would have bought MicroStrategies a year ago when it was $473, these are the guys, Michael Saylor, the Sailor Man, you know, he buys Bitcoin, that's his whole scheme, and he basically, his company buys Bitcoin, and the stock, you know, pumps anytime Bitcoin goes up. But now it's crashing, right? And it's not looking good, down 41% in a month. So the whole thing's coming undone. So I think here's what I think happened. I think they timed the upcoming Venezuela invasion, which is imminent. I mean, it could happen right now. Anytime between now and the next 2 weeks, it's happening. It's a done deal. I think they chose the date that NVIDIA was going to release earnings because they suspected that the markets were going to pump. And they were right. The market, there was a 1,000-point spread in the NASDAQ today. Okay, the market shot up early morning to 2.5% above in the NASDAQ and close to 2% on the S&P 500. And at the end of the day, it closed down 2.5%, almost a 5% spread, almost a record. I think the record was set in April, where it was a 1,900-point spread, but this was 1,000 points. So despite NVIDIA's blowout earnings, this, of course, is the crux, the nexus of the markets right now. It's what's keeping everything propped up. All confidence is built around this potential AI boom, which will happen, probably not for 10 more years. Okay, they got to get all the humanoid robots in everybody's house, all the robot slaves that eventually will turn on us and kill us all. But that's not going to happen for a while. Okay, Elon Musk is making it out like it's just down the street, while he said self-driving was coming 10 years ago, and here we are. We're getting close, not quite there yet. So all of these companies that are buying NVIDIA's chips are not profitable. Their profit margins are abysmal, but they have these crazy valuations. And that's a house of cards that's ready to collapse, because if NVIDIA's model is dependent on these companies eventually making money and they don't start making money, then they're not going to be able to buy chips. Now, that's not going to say that government isn't going to step in, because really AI at this point is a matter of national security. Super artificial intelligence is the next nuclear weapon. And if we don't get to it before the Chinese or the Russians or the Japanese or the Koreans, then there's a threat that whoever gets to it first rules the world forever. Well, until that AI kills us all. So, you know, in the context of all of this, we have AI topping. We have the fake 28-day leak, because it was fake in terms of how it was orchestrated. I explained that all in my video yesterday. We had the internet crash. We had yesterday where CloudShare went down, brought down 20% of the internet for a couple hours. We have, you know, Trump's statements today about executing senators who are guilty of sedition, and Chuck Schumer's response, making it a big deal. We have the Mamdani show in the Oval Office tomorrow, which should be interesting, to say the least. I'm sure it's going to end with, you know, Trump praising him as being a guy who has a lot of energy or whatever, you know. And this is the thing, right? Trump respects people who are confident, even if you're on the opposing end. And I've actually noticed this in a lot of debates where you'll have like a hardline communist have a very respectful debate with somebody who is hardline free market capitalist, just because they're not trying to hide, you know, their perspectives. So who knows? Who knows what can come of that? Maybe that real talk is what people need to move the conversation forward. Of course, we have the Epstein row, we have the Venezuela thing, and we have this. So I think all of this is a convenient smokescreen to cover up the fact that the United States is about to commit to a massive illegal war. The war in Venezuela is 100% illegal. And nobody is really talking about it at all. There's no protest. They're just going to go in there and they're going to steal the resources. Not us, but the elites. Okay? And no matter what you think about Maduro, as I said the other day, the guy is walking through a crowd of thousands of people with very limited amount of protection. And somebody could have easily taken him out if he was that bad of a guy and enough people hated him. You think that the people would do the job for you. But, of course, they do this whole thing where they give the Nobel Peace Prize to Maria Machado, who just so happens to be the opposition in Venezuela. That's not a coincidence, guys. You got Marco Rubio posting clown images in reference to the upcoming invasion of Venezuela. So there's a lot of hubris surrounding this invasion. I don't even think they're going to use misdirection or feint maneuvers. I think they're just going to go right in. They're just going to go and they're going to start bombing the shit out of the place. And we're going to see what people say. Will anybody even bat an eye? I don't know. Eventually, possibly. It's all going to backfire because it's just going to create a greater immigrant crisis because all those people are going to flee to North America eventually or try to, and it's all going to backfire. There's going to be blowback in some way, shape, or form. And the ultimate goal here is to get to Brazil, get them between Argentina and the new foothold in South America, which is what the United States wants. So this is a multi-purpose enterprise that they're about to embark upon. So, it's absurd. Everything is absurd right now. And what else can you say? It's crazy. And you got Trump chomping at the bit. The only way to save the economy right now is to print more money or give out stimulus checks. That's it. So as soon as Powell resigns, this is probably part of the reason why gold is so high. It's going sky high. Gold is going through the roof. As soon as they start to print again, they take the gloves off. Look out. Look out, man. It's going to get ugly. Now, I'm sure I'm missing something because, oh yes, I wanted to talk about this. This is another interesting fact on the strategic front. There's Schumer talking about Trump. So this is a map of Moscow and all of the mobile power outages. So Russia, because they're trying to combat these drones, are facing widespread mobile service outages because they have to restrict people's access, so they claim, to mobile platforms so that they can combat the drone threat, because Ukraine uses these networks in order to control the drones, right? Because they have a lot of saboteurs behind enemy lines. And so now there's these state-imposed restrictions on access at certain times of day, and that, of course, is causing problems. Now, the authorities claim that the shutdowns are for security purposes, but, of course, the West is framing this as, well, you're trying to keep the truth from your population. I think it's probably a combination of things, because Russia is genuinely concerned that the West is going to attempt all-out war against them and do a decapitation strike. So they have to remain hyper-vigilant. And this, must be to the annoyance of the West, who are trying so desperately to get the Russians to lower their guard. Vladimir Putin's not doing that. He's just not. He's not like, the Iranians who were kind of lulled into a sense of complacency and learned a hard lesson. This guy sees what we've been doing around the world, and he's going to be very, very paranoid up until the bitter end. And so you're not going to be able to take him down like this. Anyways, these outages that began in May of 2025 have spread across many regions, affecting navigation, online services, and communication. And remember, the Russians have their own internet. So to level the playing field, if they have zero-day exploit backdoors into American internet software, which they 100% do, so do the Chinese and the North Koreans and the Iranians, then they're going to start using those 0 days because they have to level the playing field a little bit here. And that's why you're seeing these acts of sabotage on the pipelines. That's why you have a spy ship just off the coast of England who was just a couple days ago caught shining a laser pointer in a, I can't remember what kind of jet it was, one of the RAF's planes anyways. And they were almost ready to take action as a result of that, right? Because they're saying, well, pilot could have crashed, so they're almost saying that that's an act of war. It's parked outside of the UK in international waters, and it's spying, just like the same one that's spying in Hawaii right now. So tensions are incredibly high. And this is why when we get close to these peace agreements, that's when it's really the most dangerous time. I've always said this. It's counterintuitive, but that's the truth. And the Russians know this. That's why Putin came correct today, from their point of view, wearing military fatigues, looking, like they're not buying into whatever it is they're concocting here in the West. So that's what's going down. And this is also a reminder for alternate communication systems, because if we're ever faced with a similar situation as they are in Russia or Ukraine, well, we're going to have our communication impeded by these forced government shutdowns, and they'll use the excuse of national security in order to do so. So that's when alternative comms like ham radios, GMRS, mesh networking, things like that are going to come in handy. And just, if anything, just a shortwave radio, some sort of receiver, so that you can get information through alternate ways. What else do I got for you guys today? I think that's about it. Yeah, this is there's B-52 bomber activity in Venezuela, or in and around that region, the Caribbean. So, I mean, it's only a matter of time, man. It's really a shame because it's just become so normalized now. People are just numb to it. Right after the peace agreement, Ukraine's firing a massive volley of drones in the direction of the Russians. Now, should I go through this? I don't know. By this, I mean the 28-point peace plan. What are we at here for time? It's not too bad. I've done worse. A reminder, guys, while I'm looking through my notes here, we have a Black Friday sale on at CanadianPreparedness.com. The last Black Friday, because I'm liquidating. Going to go YouTube full time. 40% off. 40% off. Crazy deals. All right? I mean, crazy deals. I walk through the aisles and I'm like, what? If only people knew. Okay? Some of the deals that you're getting are just well below cost for a lot of these items. So get it while you can. And there's not much left. It's really, it's looking like you see tumbleweeds blowing in the back there. But there's still a few things that for some reason, like we got these Katadyn Swiss water filtration systems that typically go for like $400. They're reduced to like $220. We got Guardian, MSR Guardian systems that are used by the U.S. military. Those are like, people just don't know some of the golden nuggets that we have, like some of the Scandinavian axes, and the Japanese saws, and the German axes, and the American knives, and we got it all. But there's a lot of things that are gone because people miss the opportunity. But there's still some really cool shit that you guys should check out. Link in the description below. 40% off. I think the code is, I'll put the code in the description. Okay, so are we going to talk about this 28-point peace plan? Before we do that, Barbie, Carolyn Levitt, says Trump does not want to execute members of Congress. Imagine it's 1985, right? You got MJ, you got two MJs, you got Mike Tyson. I mean, that's America's heyday. Hulk Hogan, right? And they put you in cryo sleep for 40 years. And you wake up, and the first headline you read is Trump does not want to execute members of Congress. You'd be like, what? We take for granted how crazy things are right now. Earlier today, Donald Trump shared a post on Truth Social calling for Democratic members of Congress to be hanged. He also posted a message that said, seditious behavior punishable by death. Let's be crystal clear. The President of the United States is calling for the execution of elected officials. I think that was Chuck Schumer who said this. And of course, Barbie in response said, nope, he doesn't want to execute you. Whew. Okay. Civil war averted. The Civil War is going to come in 2028 because the pendulum, I mean, can you believe how far the pendulum swung with Mamdani? I mean, isn't that crazy? And it's just going to swing back violently in the other way. It's going to be the Groypers next. And now what the U.S. Coast Guard, they've removed restrictions on putting swastikas on your T-shirts and stuff. I mean, why? I just say right now, unleash the Kraken, unleash Skynet. Let's get the party started. Let's do the Civil War thing. I'm as ready as I'm going to be. And let's just let the chips fall where they may. And, yeah. I'm not serious, by the way. That would suck. It will royally suck. Okay, let's just quickly talk about what's going on in Iran. Something is still percolating there. And that's why this could be the most epic 4D chess positioning in and around Venezuela that we've ever seen before. If the U.S. is actually doing what some people suspect they're doing by creating this illusion that they're going to attack Venezuela when really they're getting ready to attack Iran, I know a friend of the channel, Professor Zhang, thinks that. You know, I mean, that would be a masterful military maneuver for the ages. But I don't think that they would do that. Anyways, here's what the Iranians are saying, all right? Our assumption, and this is according to Iran's Revolutionary Guard spokesperson, Brigadier General Ali Mohammed Naini, he says, our assumption is that at any moment a war might break out. In fact, they sent out alerts to their population that they suspect a war is going to break out in December. And all you hear is crickets right now over there, right? Well, maybe not. The force does not consider any other possibilities. We're constantly vigilant, waiting for war to break out. And the Iranian foreign minister today said that we sent an official letter to the International Atomic Energy Agency, which we announced the cancellation of the cooperation agreement signed in Cairo. So this is bad because presumably they still have a lot of highly enriched uranium. But I'm going to tell you what's going on in Iran, all right? I figured it out. And without Iran, without some nemesis in the region, without some rogue pariah state in the region, then there's no reason to give Saudi Arabia F-35s. There's no reason to sell hundreds of billions of dollars in weapons to all these Middle Eastern countries. Who are you going to use it against? Yemen? You know, the little defenseless countries? Of course not. So they need a big threat, right? As the Joker always says to Batman, you complete me, right? Without you, I'm nothing. Without the Saudis being under constant threat of the Iranians, and these are arch enemies, make no mistake about it, but there's ways to, you know, the United States could try to bridge that gap, but instead they're trying to push the two into war. I made a video about this back in 2020 or 2019, and before I went on my canoe trip with Survival Lily, the day that the trip started, and I suspected that the Saudis were going to go to war with the Iranians. I still think that's going to come true, but anyways, so they need Iran. So what they're going to do is they're just going to, as the Israelis say, mow the grass, right? And keep the threat alive, try to keep them in a state of arrested development, prevent them from breaking out in a nuclear way, but they need to keep them around. Why else would the Saudis need nuclear guarantees from Pakistan? right? Why else would they need all these big weapon systems that are only for the purpose of fighting a peer? Well, it's because, the Iranians. The other thing is, and this is the even bigger issue, is that if the Saudis no longer need the American weapons, and that's all this is about. I mean, the Saudis are committing hundreds of billions of dollars just so they can get a few castrated F-35s because they have to be at a reduced level of technological sophistication that is under that of the Israeli Air Force. That's the agreement. That we're going to give the F-35s, but they're going to be slower and a lot dumber, and oh yeah, we're probably going to have a kill switch too. So as soon as you use them in a way that we don't approve of, they're just going to fall out of the sky. Sorry. They're not going to say that because they're not Canadian. So that's the thing. But the big issue is the petrodollar. Because if the Saudis enter into a détente rapprochement with the Iranians, then they don't need the weapons. And you know what? They're not as bound by the petrodollar system. They can start to really become a more active member of BRICS. And then the whole house of cards collapses, right? Because that is the linchpin of the global monetary system. The global reserve currency depends on the petrodollar complex. So they got to keep the Iranians there because the Yemenis are not a big enough threat to justify the hundreds of billions of dollars and for countries to want to put their entire destiny in the hands of the West. So the Iranians will never be taken out, I don't think. I think they'll just keep them in an arrested state of development. This is why they didn't go all the way before. They could have, continued to put their foot on the throttle, but they chose not to. Just going to stifle their development and, hit them again and then, the same thing. But unless, the Russians could do something, the Chinese could extend a nuclear umbrella to the Iranians when they're good and ready. Probably won't be for a few years, but they could. Lots of resources in Iran. Germany, they were running special forces drills in Berlin. Did I say Berlin? Berlin tunnels. So they're getting ready for either war against their own population, probably when the next bird flu pandemic hits, or war with the Ruskies. Poland still hates Russia, closing Polish consulates, mobilizations, all that stuff. So the Europeans are not happy about the supposed 28-point peace plan. Here it is in a nutshell. I'm just going to highlight the most salient points. Ukraine's sovereignty has been fully confirmed. That's number one. Ukraine's a sovereign nation, right? Comprehensive non-aggression pact between Russia, Ukraine, and Europe. Russia pledges no further invasions. NATO agrees no more eastward expansion. Well, there's nowhere else to expand to, eastward anyways. I think you can go down into the Balkans there, but you can't really expand, unless you're talking about Ukraine. There's no other country that is on Russia's border that isn't already in NATO. So that's a moot point unto itself. If anything, there should be some agreement in there that they're going to roll back NATO, or they're going to, regress in their alliances. Ukraine receives explicit U.S. security guarantees. Now, this is the big one. Again, they're going to have to put troops in Ukraine for this, because that's the only way you can enforce such a thing. It's likely going to be these readiness task forces that they were talking about a year or so ago, where they'll be in the rear and they could be called upon in a moment's notice if need be. But immediately, if you got NATO troops fighting against Russians, every time a single bullet is fired, you got the guy with his hand on the nuclear button, all right? Ukrainian armed forces would be capped at 600,000 troops. Well, if NATO is interoperable with Ukraine at that point, then is there any restriction on NATO troops? No. So, again, this is, there's workarounds here. And 600,000 troops, well-trained troops in the modern day with technology as a force multiplier is a lot more than it used to be. So that's a lot of troops. Ukraine is not going to agree to that. I hear most of the pundits on the Ukrainian side saying Ukraine's never going to agree to any of this stuff, so I guess we'll see. Zero NATO troops on Ukrainian soil. Well, NATO troops. They didn't say U.S. troops. They didn't say, some other coalition which is independent of NATO. Regardless, if you're getting Article 5-like security guarantees, then it doesn't matter. Ukraine constitutionally bans NATO membership forever. NATO writes it into its charter. European fighter jets repositioned to Poland, which effectively means Poland gets nukes. And they've wanted nukes, and they've declared that they're going to get nukes. So Poland will be a nuclear state with the means of deploying them. The U.S. guarantee voids if Ukraine attacks Russia. Full sanctions snapback and a military response if Russia invades. Now, this could actually provide a bit of plausible deniability and out in the case that hostilities do flare up again. Ukraine fast track towards EU membership, immediate preferential market access. I will say that this is a far more detailed proposal. And I think just the extent of the detail shows that there's been a significant amount of thought put into it, which is positive. Massive global reconstruction fund, tech, AI, gas pipelines, Russia reintegrated, face sanctions relief, long-term U.S.-Russia deals in energy. That's a joke. That's never going to happen. The only way that's going to happen if this whole thing was a scam, and I've floated this highly unlikely conspiracy theory before, that this is just an opportunity for Russia and the West to train their armies so that they eventually will come together and fight the Chinese. Like this whole thing, use the expendable. I don't mean this, that they actually are expendable, but deplete their forces to upgrade their militaries to eventually confront the Chinese. And then they're going to backstab China. And now that Putin is cozying up to Xi, then, maybe he's getting a lot of intelligence. Are the Chinese that naive? I don't think so either, right? So they have to remain guarded as well. And I don't think this is very likely because we've seen the skullduggery of the West. The Russians know that we can't be trusted, and look how many Russians they've killed. So I think that that's very unlikely. But anything can happen in war, right? I mean, allies can become foes, foes can become allies almost overnight if the conditions are right. So you just never know. $100 billion in frozen Russian assets will go to Ukraine to rebuild. U.S. will take 50% of the profits. Europe adds another $100 billion, and it will rest into a joint U.S.-Russia investment fund. Well, I don't think Europe was consulted with this, or at least that's the theatric. Because again, what they're trying to do is frame this as if it's pro-Russian, and the Ukrainians are getting thrown under the bus. But that's not really what's happening here, okay? Because the Russians don't like the sounds of this either because Zaporozhye and Kherson, the other two oblasts, will be frozen along current lines, but those will still be contested territories into perpetuity, which means that that's a potential flashpoint for future hostilities. Joint Russia-U.S. Security Working Group. Now, this is one of those things that they're still playing this facade, right? They're still playing charades where you have Marco Rubio pretending as though that the U.S. are impartial third-party mediators to Ukraine and Russia until they drop the whole act and they own this conflict and they say, this is our war. We're the ones who are enabling Ukraine, not just the Americans, but also the Europeans as well. Until they actually own it and we get through this facade, nothing is fundamentally going to change. In my personal opinion, I hope I'm proven wrong. Russia legally enshrines a non-aggression policy towards Europe and Ukraine. They know how jurisprudent the Russians are. So if they can enshrine something like that in the Constitution, then maybe that would prohibit the Russians from actually taking more offensive actions in the future, but that's never stopped. When it comes down to a fight for territory, all that shit goes out the window. Extend nuclear arms control treaties instead of New START, including New START. This should be done regardless. Like, why can't this be done regardless? Because it's the U.S. versus Russia. So why is this at all a factor? You know what I mean? So this whole thing's a clown show. Ukraine permanently remains non-nuclear. Again, it's a moot point if you have nuclear guarantees from the transatlanteans, us, which they will, because that's what a security guarantee amounts to, ultimately. Zaporozhye nuclear power plant restarts under the International Atomic Energy, and the power is split 50-50 to Russia and Ukraine. Remember, the Russians already think that the rest of Zaporozhye and Kherson is a part of Russia. So they would have to relinquish control and alter their own constitution, I suppose, to allow for that, which, I mean, Putin has a final say either way, but might not be a popular idea. Mind you, a lot of Russians who just want the war to end might see that as a meager concession. Both sides launch tolerance education, protect minorities, and outlaw Nazi ideology. I have a sneaking suspicion that the Azov battalion is not going to be approving of that one. And how is that really going to work? I mean, there's so many potential points of conflict there. You know, bringing the Russian language as one of the official languages, even though half of them speak it. You know, that's not gonna go over well. It seems like one of those things that's not a really big issue in the grand scheme of things. The point is military resources, how that's going to be divided. But these sort of cultural things are what really work to percolate the tensions that can actually bubble up on the ground that can amount to military hostilities down the road. Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk will be recognized as Russia. Kherson and Zaporozhye are frozen along the current lines. And the remaining bit of Donetsk that Ukraine is currently in control of will be conceded to the Russians, and it will be a demilitarized zone. So the Russians can't put forces there. Borders locked, no changes by force. Russia guarantees Ukrainian use of the Dnieper and safe Black Sea grain exports. Full prisoner of war and civilian exchanges, family reunification program. Ukraine holds nationwide elections within 100 days. Apparently there was a clause in here, or there was one of these that they had removed, the Umerov. And I don't know if this is just scuttle, but it's from a fairly reputable source. But not only are they going to have amnesty for no war crimes, but amnesty for investigations of corruption. Okay? So this is where I think this thing might have legs, in that if they can make out like bandits, you know, they get a couple $100 billion to play with, and, you know, they're going to freeze the lines because they ain't moving forward anyways, unless the West just loads them with long-range weapons and they're able to somehow start pushing the Russians back, which, of course, would likely elicit a nuclear response from the Russians. It's not a bad deal for I mean, it's as good as it's going to get, right? And whether the Russians accept it, because the NATO security guarantee thing is unlikely. So, you know. Legally binding, enforced by a Trump-led peace council. Trump had nothing to do with this. I mean, let's stop kidding ourselves. I mean, it's just a joke to think that Trump had anything to do with creating such an elaborate agreement. I mean, there's probably dozens of people working on this. Maybe Trump read it. Maybe the first page. Doesn't read his intel briefs, from what I hear, so would not be surprised if he had very little input into this, but we'll call it that. Immediate ceasefire upon signature. Forces pull back to agreed lines. Let's hope it works out. But I'm going to be a realist on this one, and I'm going to say it looks like a Trojan horse. It looks like a way to buy time, and I don't think the Russians are buying it. And it looks like the war is going to continue until it ends on Russia's terms. And the Europeans aren't happy about it either, and they're panicking. And but again, we don't know if this isn't just all a big distraction to take eyes off Venezuela, because that's a big prize for them. I mean, that's a massive prize. It's proximate to the U.S. mainland. They have incredible amounts of resources. They already have their puppet candidate waiting, seething, just giddy as hell to sell her country off. And, you know, we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens. You know, I have 15 videos that are private on the Canadian Prepper channel that I haven't made live yet. I've just been incredibly stingy with my content because, and that's like the high production stuff that we invest days and days, you know, to shoot each video. And I'm just, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just don't feel like YouTube deserves it at this point. Because, anyways, we're not going to get into that. I'm going to release the content, but it's like I'm releasing these videos on that channel, and the algorithm is not, it's simpatico with me right now, and that could be my own fault. You know, I take full responsibility for it. I don't want to whine about being shadow banned necessarily, but I'm being stingy with it. So if it seems like the channel has been a little bit light on content lately, it's not because we haven't been working, I assure you. I mean, I got 15 videos, rock solid videos for you guys I've been waiting to release. The problem is, oh, I'm not going to get into it. I'm tired. I got a frog in my throat right now, and I think I need some rest. What time is it? Oh my goodness. We got to go to bed. See ya.